Okay, take three. Well, hey everyone. Welcome back to Critical Weight Theory. And today we're going to be doing another look at some animation. And we're going to be looking at a story, some characters, and the creative magic behind one of your favorite animated shows, or actually sort of a spin off from a classic cartoon. So I'm Wade, and today I'm exploring BMO, the first episode of Adventure Time Distant Lands, which is a spin off from the original Adventure Time series. So it was released on HBO Max on June 25th, 2020, and it clocks in at around 45 minutes, give or take a few, and it wastes no time throwing us into a weird and wonderful corner of the Adventure Time universe. So, what is BMO? First off, let's talk about the setup of the episode. BMO is technically a prequel. I'm talking about the episode, not the character. It takes place before the events of the main Adventure Time series. So that's a bit of a spoiler. Whoops. Spoiler alert. Yeah. But if you're listening to this right now, you had a chance to see it first. I may have just spoiled something for you, but it's been out for about 5 years now, so I think spoilers are a little bit less of a factor when something has aged a little bit. Yes, it centers on BMO, the sentient video game console character, and an occasional detective and space cowboy and all around delight. Considered a very likable character. It's a little bit tricky to trash talk BMO because or he is just such an innocent character. They refer to the character as he in the episode. So BMO's always been a fan favorite, and this episode proves that BMO can totally carry a story on his own. And, that's one of the basic concepts behind the spin off series is that you're kind of hyper concentrating on a specific character or maybe a few characters from the original series. So it starts off in space. BMO's on a solo mission, apparently to colonize Mars, because of course, why not? And BMO's casually floating along, dreaming big, when a distress signal changes everything. And this is where we encounter the drift and a character named Y5. BMO crash lands on the drift, which is a space station that's kind of falling apart. There are monsters lurking around, the tech is run down, and something shady is definitely going on. Enter Y5, a rabbit like alien kid with a big brain and overprotective parents. Y5's supposed to stay out of trouble, follow the rules, and generally keep her head down. See, as you noticed, I said Y5 like Wi-Fi. When I first watched this episode, I thought that's what the character's name was, like like a Wi-Fi signal. But it turns out it's Y5. It's a pretty easy thing to miss here, and I gotta say I'm going to address this in my previous review of a show. I I had some people commenting that I called Star Trek The Next Generation Star Trek The New Generation. Like that's such a big deal. So, so there are nerds out there who take this stuff very seriously, living up to the nerd stereotype. And somebody even went after me because I didn't mention Gene Roddenberry. And that's despite the fact that I'm actually pretty sure that I did mention Gene Roddenberry, which makes the critique quite strange because I mentioned it at least once, the name Gene Roddenberry. But anyway, I just wanted to give you a little bit of insight into what can happen if you're mispronouncing names and whatnot. So, okay, it's Y5. I've got that straight. You don't need to come after me about the character's name, nerds. Anyway, like I said, BMO crash landed, and Y5 is a rabbit like Kid Alien, and Y5's supposed to stay out of trouble, follow the rules, and generally keep her head down, but BMO doesn't do rules. BMO does hero stuff, sheriff stuff. Let's fix everything with joy and duct tape kind of stuff. A very uh, innocent yet resourceful character, as we find out in the episode. And that energy is exactly what pulls Y5 out of her shell, and it's also what addresses the bigger conflict of the episode. And, that leads me to talk about villains here. The big bad here is Hugo, a smooth talking tech bro type who positions himself as a savior of the drift. He promises solutions, offers hope, and, oh yeah, secretly exploits everyone to save his own skin. And gee, why might that sound relevant to the modern era? I have no idea. Anyway, Y5 figures this out with BMO's help, and what unfolds is part buddy comedy, part coming of age story, and part space western takedown of corporate saviorism. So by the time BMO and Y5 take on Hugo, the stakes feel real, but so does the fun. It is a fun episode. It's adventurous, as you would expect the Adventure Time universe to be. BMO's solutions are as unorthodox as ever, and somehow they work because that's the magic of BMO. And so the themes of the episode, you've got the coming of age theme that I mentioned. Y5 learns to think for herself and step into her own power, and, to an extent, question her parents. There's heroism, of course. BMO isn't brave in a traditional sense. BMO's goofy, fearless, and wildly optimistic. So there are times where, in this episode, this is another spoiler, so be alerted to that. But there's a moment where BMO is literally taken apart, basically dead. So, again, not a traditional hero who very easily loses, but eventually BMO does come back, and it's it's exactly what you might expect from a character like this, and in an unorthodox sort of story that Adventure Time is known for. And BMO does ultimately have the type of energy that gets things done. And of course, another theme here is exploitation versus community. Hugo wants to extract and escape. BMO and Y5 want to repair and connect. They don't seem as quick to leave the place. It seems like they want to almost salvage what they've got. And even though it's set in space, BMO still has that Adventure Time vibe. Heartfelt, absurd, philosophical, but always entertaining. So, is this episode actually worth watching? Yeah, I would say so, if you're a fan of Adventure Time. BMO does something really important. It shows us how big the Adventure Time universe actually is, and it shows that you don't necessarily need Finn and Jake to have a decent story. Although I am more of a Finn and Jake fan, but BMO is a likable character, and I think there could even be a quality spin-off just with BMO alone. So the story is also outside of Ooh, which is of course the world that Adventure Time normally occurs in, and we're meeting new species, new threats, new characters, new ideas. It's not just more of the same, it's an expansion of the universe, which is where this miniseries gets its title from. And through it all, BMO proves they're more than comic relief. All these characters, BMO's a full on hero and not in the conventional way, as I said, because BMO can be actually pretty easily thwarted. BMO doesn't act like BMO is brave most of the time. They just are, BMO just is a brave character. And that makes for a surprisingly powerful story. BMO just doesn't put on an act. It's a bit of a different type of character. It doesn't act like a hero exactly. It's more like an innocent character who's just sort of, I guess, programmed to be heroic. Although BMO does seem to have free will at the same time. Excuse me, losing my voice. Anyway, visually, the series is still colorful. It has that expressive Adventure Time style and a little bit of extra layers of sci fi grit in this episode. The drift feels soft and run down at the same time, like a place that was once hopeful but has since lost its way. The animation team keeps things fluid and warm, even in cold space. It really shows that the show's got an ability to grow without losing its original soul, if you will. And if you haven't watched BMO or you're due for a rewatch, go ahead and check it out. It's weird. It's actually a little bit emotional here and there, and it's BMO being BMO in space. So thanks for listening to this episode. If you liked this, you can leave a review. You can make a dumb comment if I said something wrong, which is inevitable because I'm kind of speaking off the cuff here. Despite having notes, I can go on these little tangents, and some people get annoyed. But you know what? To hell with it. That's the way people are. Anyway, you can be unlike those people and subscribe, and let me know what show or special you'd want me to look at next. I could add it to the list. Obviously, there's an entire universe worth of content, so I probably wouldn't be able to get around to everything, but I could at least add it to my list. So until next time, stay weird and stay animated.